This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with coach and player development manager at Southampton Football Club, Iain Brunnschweiler. He discusses his journey into professional football with stops at UK coaching and Hampshire and England cricket, how organisations can better support players on their journey, both developing them holistically and preparing them for the elite level, as well as what stood out to him with playing with some of the great players in modern cricket such as Kevin Piertersen and Shane Warne. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure you share it with friends and family. I hope you enjoy. Perfect. So, Brunchy, really appreciate you jumping on. This has been a long time in the works, and both of us have very busy schedules. But how are things? How was your Christmas? All that type of stuff.
Yeah, hi, Righty. Very nice to be with you. Christmas has been fun, a bit different this year, with a number of positive COVID tests in the house. So we've had a quieter Christmas than usual, but very, very precious family time. So yeah, we're all happy and thankfully all as healthy as we can be.
Good, glad to hear it. So, obviously, as I mentioned there, I've been really keen to get you on. I think the experiences you've got, and particularly for me, kind of over multiple sports, is really interesting to discuss. So, for people that maybe don't know you or haven't come across your background, you just want to give us a whistle-stop tour of, I guess, some of your playing highlights, and then also coaching and coach development work as well.
Yeah, no problem. I'll try not to bore everyone. So I guess football was my first love. Played at Southampton's Centre of Excellence, as it was back in the day. So I trained at the Dell back in the early 90s. And then when I went to secondary school, got introduced to cricket, amongst other sports, and found I was okay at catching cricket balls and hitting them as well. So ended up being a professional cricketer at Hampshire. And then when I finished as a player, I managed to get a part-time role as academy coach. I worked with Tony Middleton, who's been a great influence in my playing and coaching career, and now is still at Hampshire. So I started working with the academy as a coach, and then I just tried to get as many coaching qualifications, any qualifications I could. So I ended up doing multiple roles at Hampshire. So coaching the academy, doing strength and conditioning, the academy and the pros, and then coaching with the pros as well. So over a sort of 5 or 6 year period, lots of coaching. And then got lucky enough to get a job with England Cricket, heading up the national under-17 programmes, and then worked with the under-17s and under-19s. So had a pretty much dream job, travelling the world with the best young cricketers in the UK, and sort of helping them play some cricket. And then after that, cricket became a bit untenable from a family perspective, so needed a job in the UK. So I worked at UK Coaching for about 18 months, leading their talent and performance coaching team. And that was my first step into coach development. So I oversaw a team of coach developers, delivering coach development solutions into multiple Olympic sports. So I got a real insight into how the Olympics work, and had to kind of help negotiate government funding for programs and stuff like that, which was really interesting on a personal level. And then a job came up at Southampton, so a bit of a full circle. I'm a big fan of Southampton, so where I sort of started as well. So I came into the role of coach development manager at Southampton, and that's where I currently do my day job, so working with the coaches across the whole of the pathway, really, from under nines all the way up through to the sort of more senior end of the club. So a bit of a dream. It's a local club. I live locally, and get to be around some really talented coaches and see some really talented players.
Very committed man to trade in the West Indies for Southampton. Family's done very well.
It's about this time of year that I give my wife a long look and go, why am I not in Dubai or Sri Lanka right now? But then I look at my beautiful children and I think that's why, you know.
I think if we go into reverse with this, it's probably the best place to start. So with your coach development work with Southampton, I guess the first question for me is what drew you to the role, and what drew you to the role in the club itself?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a massive passion for the game of football, and as I said, I love the game. Support Southampton. I'm not a football coach. You know, I played at a reasonably high level, but I'd never really coached other than, you know, helping a few kids out. But having done the job in Olympic sport, the allure of developing those who coach players became really strong in me. You know, I've always wanted to help others get better at what they do, and I've always loved elite sport. So those are kind of two really strong themes in my sort of personal journey: loving the game, loving helping people try and be elite, and also just helping others. So the opportunity to work with a really broad range of coaches, coaching from under sevens, under eights in the pre-academy, all the way through to guys working with the B team and the first team. It's a really it was a really alluring role, and I thought it would really challenge me because I'd been in cricket for a long time. I was well established in the game. I could probably go to every single county, first-class county in the whole country, and I knew people. So I stepped into a place of challenge, if I'm honest, and I really enjoy that. I like going out of my comfort zone. That's something that drives me, and I wanted to prove probably to myself that I could do it and that I could go into a sport which is notoriously tricky for people who don't have a massive amount of football credibility, and see if I could firstly survive, and then secondly do some good, and hopefully with the work I'm doing some good.
So that was going to be my next question. How did you tackle not the lack of credibility? I think that's a bit harsh, but whereas maybe traditionalists would go, you know, head of coaching or head of coach management needs to be someone who's been on the pitch for 15, 20 years or has played the game at Premier League level, etc. How did you feel coming in from an outside perspective? And did that have any positives for you or negatives?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, firstly, I'd have to say a big thank you to Ed Vaid and Matt Hale, who were the academy manager and assistant academy manager who brought me in, and Martin Hunter, who was the technical director at the time, for I guess taking a bit of a risk on me, because it is a risk to bring in someone who doesn't have the football credibility, and I'm very comfortable with the fact I don't. I guess it's all trade-offs, though, isn't it? You know, I've coached and played at a very high level, albeit in a different sport. And I believe personally that coaching is coaching, and that the absolute core skills of coaching are very transferable across multiple sports. You obviously then just need to have above the line knowledge of the sport in order to be able to work in that environment. And I would describe it that I probably had just enough football credibility to engage in the conversations. And look, I mean, you're a great example, Righty, of someone who, when I came into the role, I'm working with, you know, potentially up to about 65 different coaches, ranging from part-time coaches in the pre-academy who do a couple of hours a week to full-time under 23s coaches. There's a broad range of human beings there with different experiences. I would say the vast majority of those coaches are just keen for anyone with some knowledge about coaching to help them. So there was a real, you know, I think that the work Matt and Ed and everyone else had done at the club meant that there was a real culture of development already. People wanted to get better. So they were really interested to know what I thought of their coaching, what I thought about coaching in general. So I just engaged in conversations. I wasn't naive enough to think that let's take a look at the time when I came into the club in our professional development phase. God, who were the under 18s coaches had probably played 600 professional games between them. The under 23s lead coach had played 100 international games of football. So that's a slightly different challenge for someone who, understandably, they would just think like, who's this cricket bloke? So I don't think I'd be worth my salt if I approached those profile of coaches in the same way I might approach a coach who's currently doing a sports science degree. They're a 21-year-old, they're open-minded. They're just different propositions. So I guess, sorry, long-winded answer, but I just had to think about what might each of these individuals in front of me need from me, and that's probably different. And I think there's probably a real transfer there just for coaching, isn't it? It's like having a squad of players in front of you. You've got your best player at one end, you've got your lad who's with the least confidence at the other end. You're going to have to coach differently, aren't you? So yeah, I just tried to engage in conversations, find out what people were interested in, what motivated, what they were trying to get out of their own coaching, and then I could start trying to provide some support.
But yeah, I think that's a really nice example you've used there in terms of the differences between, in that pathway. So you will have people that have played, 600 league games or whatever it is, and probably have experienced some very top managers as well as players that have gone on to really excel. And you also have individuals that have just come out of university that are, kind of fresh and open to really new ideas, or kind of enthusiastic to learn everything. So for you as a practitioner looking to develop those, what type of initial conversations you having to establish what areas that they need to work on or would like to work on, and what areas actually is already a super strength for them? So for the time being, we can keep that plodding along, but that might not be something that we focus on.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's something I wrangled with at the outset. If I'm honest, I was still a relatively novice coach developer. I'd have done a lot of player development. At the heart of it, though, again, I think there's a lot of similarities, which is, my first question is always like, just tell me about you. I want to know your biography. I want to understand your journey to how you're standing here on this training pitch in front of me right now. Because if I can understand that, that will help me understand you as a person. And if I can't understand you as a person, then it's going to be very difficult for me to help you and me identify any areas for support. So that would be almost my starting point as a coach developer, is trying to understand the person in front of me. And then within that, trying to understand what is it that this person is after, like what's their motivation, because some coaches want to be the next Man United manager, and some coaches want to be the best under 11s coach they can be for Southampton Football Club. Again, so those two things are different and they take different skill sets. So yeah, understanding the person, understanding their motivation. And then a big one, which I certainly didn't think was that relevant at the outset, but now I think is really, really relevant, is trying to help the person become aware of what they're currently doing and raising their own awareness. It's been a fascinating project. I mean, you know this, righty, but I've sort of coded coaching behaviours, I've recorded coaches, I've played videos back to them, I've done all the sort of coach development style interventions. And all of those interventions really are to help the coach get a picture of themselves. Because if I go back 10 or 12 years, let's go back to whatever, 10 years ago, I'm head coach of the England under-17s. I was probably doing some stuff quite well, and I was probably doing some stuff really rubbish. I didn't have anyone following me around, showing me videos of my team talks and going, "That's interesting that you said this," or I thought this was great, but what about when you said this? I think I lost the group there. So that kind of raising of self-awareness, I think, is really important. And a combination of these factors about understanding the person, understanding their motivations, and understanding their current practice, if you try and merge those together, that's when I think you start going, okay, well, what is it that might be helpful? And that could be a range of things.
Yeah, so obviously I think if you look at like tech type support, I think that's easy for coaches to go and work on. You know, you can either go on courses or you can sit in a canteen previous to COVID, and, you know, you can hash that out with your analysis or other coaches and learn and develop that skill. For what you said there around having a level of self-awareness about how your actions or words or team talks affect the group, that can be something that obviously you can get it played back to you, but it's obviously at the moment, isn't it? If you're in a halftime team talk, one word all of a sudden can change the entire mood of what that group or team or individual's feeling. So how do you get people to, I guess, get better at that and understanding that a single word or a single phrase could have either really positive consequences or negative?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's certainly not a simple or easy answer, as none of these are when it comes to human development. So I can tell you what I know or think now. It will probably have changed in 2 years' time when I listen back to this. I think the first step is raising awareness of what they're doing. So I know we've covered that already, but it's really, really important that until someone's played it back to you, you might not know that you say every third word, or you have a really weird, I know that I move around a lot. Like, you can see it now. I've probably got ADHD or something. And I know that can really put people off if I'm coaching them. So I've been made aware of that. And therefore I've got an opportunity to do something about it. So now if I choose to be really still and calm, this is taking me energy, but I'm being, and I know this is a podcast, this is not a great example, but I'm choosing to do something which is developmentally difficult for me. Okay, so the first thing is, unless I was made aware of that by somebody else or by watching a video of myself on an interview or something like that, I wouldn't know. So the first step is, do they know? So let's say the coach repeats themselves loads of times. They probably aren't aware of it until they've had it played back to them. And that, I think, is when the sort of difficult bit or the real skill piece comes in, is to go, right, if this is the issue we think is important to resolve, what's our plan? and that, I guess, that can be totally different based on what it is you're trying to change. So I'll give you an example from someone you know really, really well. So one of our extremely high potential coaches is a guy called Gary McDermott. And Gary has worked with younger age groups at the club for a number of years now. He's a very skillful, very reflective coach. So when I first started doing observations of Gary, it became really obvious, and he won't mind me saying this, it became really obvious that he just got so passionately involved in the game, whether it's training or matches, particularly matches. It was like verbal diarrhea from the sideline. And so I use a coding system, which is a kind of amalgamated system that there's lots of different coding systems for coding coaches. I've got one that we've used in-house now for a few years. And I showed him the output of his efforts from the sideline. And I think this is a really key point as well. I try and show this stuff without judgment. I just say, this is what happened. So I said, look, here you go, Gaz. In a 80-minute game of football, the statistics are that you made 320 comments to the pitch, or something like that. I can't remember the numbers, but it was about that. It was high. I was like, so that's, whatever that works out at for a minute, one every 15. So every 15 seconds, you're shouting. Just when, what are your thoughts? And Gaz is a really smart, reflective guy. He went, oh God, that's really a bit much, isn't it? So he's had that awareness raised that he's shouting a lot, and that might not be what the players need. It might be, and this will maybe come on to another point about what's your intention. But he can now do something about it. So Gaz did. We talked about it, and we were like, right, well, how are we going to try and do something different? And Gaz came up with this. In fact, he said, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 6 stones in my right pocket. And in each quarter, because the game's split into four, in each quarter, I'm only going to say 6 things. And every time I say it, I'm going to take the stone out of one pocket and put it in the other. And I know that once those stones have gone across, I can't say anything else. So it's quite an extreme intervention, but it is something that's made a massive difference. Now, we don't want Gaz just to say 6 things a quarter, because it might need to be more than that based on the context of the game, but you get the point. So raise the awareness, then discuss what the options are, and then just come up with a plan. Like, let's have a go, and then have some way of checking in on that plan. So I don't know if that's answered the question.
No, that's really good. It's quite a unique way of doing it as well. And I think that sometimes, coaches can be afraid to think outside the box a little bit, but that's quite a nice one in terms of you can share it with others if you want, or you can just keep it to yourself. But actually, it's a really conscious way of going, right, I'm going to improve on this area, which is really good. I guess off the back of that, having worked with Gaz and knowing Gaz, but also, in my opinion, I could be wrong, he might disagree, actually working quite well together. I think we bounce off one another quite well. Do you think that this is where coaching pairs and coaching dynamic is really important? Because you may have someone like Gaz who's high energy, high passion, very talkative. If you get in with someone else who's like that, all of a sudden the information that's flying to the group is, a 15-minute team talk isn't long enough. Whereas actually, if you've got someone who's maybe slightly more reserved and is really good at summarising points, Gaz may say those interventions, and you've got someone at the end who goes, right, this is what Gaz has just said, 3, 2, 1, off you go. Do you think that that's the importance of coaching pairs? And do you think that that's something moving forward we're going to see more and more, I guess, care taken with who coaches end up working with?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's been a real focus for us since I've been at the club, if I'm honest. Right, he's trying to work out what are the best possible matchups of coaches that we can get, and I'd extend it further to say and MDT. I think we're constantly striving to think, how can we do things better? Because the coaching pair, the dynamic between them, as you say, is absolutely vital. Because if you get, there's trade-offs, aren't there? There's trade-offs in all directions. But if you can match up coaches who provide something different for the players, that's going to give them a better chance of having a better experience. Then if you think about the MDT, because we've got such talented scientists and psychologists and analysts, the work that we're doing now in terms of the analysis team and the role they play in the coaching week is massively expanded from them just coding video footage. Someone like Connor Cole, who's working with our under 16s at the moment, Connor was an intern, but now he's on the side of the pitch with a live video stream in training. The players are coming over to him, and the coaches are just getting out of the way and allowing Connor to deliver some coaching to the players. Like, this is brilliant, because Connor will bring something different than Danny or Jez, the technical coaches, and then you might have the S&C coach able to deliver. So I think, yes, coaching pair dynamic is incredibly important, and also let's think about the whole dynamic, because all of these adults in a youth development perspective are all having an influence on the learning environment. And I think a big piece of work, not only for us, but in all sort of areas of sport, is what is the role of each practitioner during each contact point? What are they doing? Because one of my observations, probably more so in football than in any of the other sports I've worked in, is I'll turn up to training and there'll be quite a lot of people there, because football's a well-resourced game. I'm working in a Category 1 Premier League academy. There's lots of jobs, lots of people, and a lot of them are watching training while one person delivers it. That's probably doing it a disservice, but we've got to be more intelligent than that, haven't we? We've got to have roles specific to that moment, and that takes a bit of humility as well, because if the head coach is leading a technical session, firstly, an obvious one, what is their coaching partner doing? So do they have another focus? Could they be zooming in on some individuals or on a unit, or looking at something different? but what's the S&C coach doing? They could be focusing on the individual development plan of some movement patterns of a player, or the analyst could be looking at some stuff. So that kind of role clarity during contact points is vital. Going right back to your initial question about coaching pairs, I think we and other clubs and different sports will be doing more and more about understanding the individual. And we've got all sorts of psychometrics available, haven't we, and profiling tools. And we've done some stuff in-house around, like a merged model of various bits to go like, what's this person bringing and what does the environment need? And what the environment probably needs is a bit of diversity, because if you've got too much of the same, you're probably missing out on X percentage of the players thriving. So yeah, I'll hang that one out there. You might.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point, and I think that's why probably me and Gaz got on quite well, because we're different in our delivery. So actually, it allowed the whole group to improve, because whilst maybe the people he engaged with, it allowed them to flourish in a particular way, and maybe the ones that are more challenging for him to engage with, that's probably the area that I picked up quite nicely. So between us, we kind of covered the group, which was quite interesting. I guess linking to the last point that you said around having metrics to kind of assess what people's strengths and weaknesses might be. How do you go around doing that and figuring out what pair may be optimal or what pair may work very well together?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely not one I or we have solved, that is for sure. But I think my current stance would be you need lots of information. I think one of our challenges is we're always trying to find a golden bullet, aren't we? Just do this one test and we'll know everything about you. It simply doesn't work that way. So we do lots of stuff and we try and merge it all together. So we use, I've said psychometrics. So we'll get a kind of a psychometric profile, which across the club is standardized. So that gives a piece of information. We've got a coaching philosophy. So we've used that in a number of different ways, but it's a series of statements. But actually, we've used it as a profiling tool to kind of go, well, look, of these 11 statements, rate yourself about what you think your strengths and weaknesses are. And then also your phase lead will rate you, and your peer coach can provide some intel. So we use our coaching philosophy. We've done something called the Thrive framework, which looks at the kind of human elements of coaching behaviour, like the psychosocial bits and physical bits. And then we get player feedback. Player feedback, I think, is incredibly important. Again, you go back to that point about raising awareness. Lots of the coaches have had some things raised about them they maybe didn't know or think before. And then observations from myself or members of the coach development team or phase leads. So if you think about that kind of picture, I think I've named sort of 5 or 6 different elements there. If you merge all those together, you get a sort of reasonably well-informed view of a coach as an individual practitioner. And then you can go, right, well, that's kind of our view of coach A. And then we've got the rest of these coaches and we've got similar information from them, like who do we think might work best together given this range of information we've got about them. So definitely not got it solved, but I think the headline would be, if you've got quite a lot of information from quite a lot of different sources, then you're more well informed to make a better decision.
Perfect. And so leading on to this, and it's something we've discussed a little bit. I remember being at a dinner table with you and discussing this out in Inter Milan, which is around kind of at the top end, players taking more accountability for their development or their performance. And I think what we're talking around coaching pairs and stuff, obviously when it gets to first team level, ultimately it does come down to results on a Saturday, or at the moment a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, and all of that type of stuff. So you may not have a manager that is overly fussed about your whole characteristic, and he may be focused on tech tack and winning on the Saturday. How do you go around preparing a player for that environment, that jump, where they may have gone through this entire pathway of all this thoughtful care, maybe coddling a little bit, to actually listen, winning on a Saturday is the be all and end all for us ultimately?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's the one that keeps us all awake, isn't it? I think going back to very, very headline principles. So if we go back to the development pathway, I know it's a sort of phrase that's bandied around a lot, but I do believe it's very relevant, which is around high challenge and high support. And certainly, I learned a lot about this working in the cricket world. I'm very, very lucky to the guy who was my boss at England Cricket was a bloke called Simon Timpson, who's he's gone on to be the director of performance for the Olympic sports, for the 2012 Olympics and 2016 Olympics. Then he was director of performance at British Tennis, and now he's director of performance at Man City. So this guy's pretty good at what he does. So I feel incredibly fortunate to have spent quite a lot of time with Simon in some quite formative years as a practitioner. And we were trying to solve this problem. Simon's vision was, how do we have an oversupply of international ready young cricketers? That was our goal. That was the development program. So, and the key principle, and Simon changed it slightly. His view was it's high challenge preceded by high support. Yeah, so using that principle, that guided our practice, and we wanted players to have experienced elements of both a training and playing program that meant that when they stepped over the white line or the white rope in cricket into the international arena, they had had relevant experiences that had led them to that point. I'm very lucky to work again with a guy called Mo Bobat. So Mo's currently the performance director in cricket. So Mo and I started on the same day, and we were trying to solve this problem. How do we produce game-ready international cricketers? Like, we don't know how to do it, but we're going to have a right go at it. So I think our theory, and it would continue to be my theory, is you can't go into a game at the MCG in front of 80,000 people if you've never experienced anything that's even close to that. So you're unlikely to be able to replicate that, because you can't just get 8,000 people to the MCG and also have the authentic pressure that comes with that. But what you can do is you can expose players to experiences that might replicate elements of that. And then you're trying to build like a tool belt of resources within those players. So that I think is that's at the heart of it, is going, well, what are the requirements? The requirements are, if you're going to play Premier League football or international cricket or be an Olympic athlete that steps out onto the track in front of a big crowd, like, what are the bits of that are going to challenge you? And therefore, what are the strategies, internal strategies, that you're going to need to be able to have at your disposal that can help you take on those challenges? Some of those are going to be skill-based. So being able to deal with a short ball on a bouncing deck in cricket is definitely going to be needed. Being able to be robust enough to run around a lot for 90 minutes is also going to be needed if you're in football, or being physically capable of cycling around that track or running around. So there's some skills and some physical stuff. My personal view is the stuff that really, really differentiates at the top level is the psychology. So how do you actually deal with it? How do you deal with the media slating you leading into the game, or the pressure you personally feel because you've got your whole family and friends watching you? So these are the sort of things that I think we need to, and I don't think we're particularly good at it, if I'm honest. I think we can do a lot better at it. Is, what is the requirements of this environment across the most holistic of venues? Even like managing yourself at home when you've not got your food laid out for you. What are the requirements? And then where are you now? And then how do we plot a path so that you've got a better chance of dealing with those requirements when it comes to it? And that, I think, is at the absolute heart of having players that are ready to step into that environment.
So when we're talking about, and we'll use the MCG example, I think it's very poignant at the moment, but we won't go into too much detail on that. But when you're looking at around the psychological factors of preparing someone for that, because like you said, like even for me growing up, who I watched cricket, I didn't play it extensively until secondary school and whatnot, but I was aware of the Boxing Day test. It's a really big thing out in Australia and in the Ashes and all of that type of stuff. How do you go around psychologically preparing an individual for that environment, be it for some of them when they're 24, 25 years of age? How do you go around plotting a course to say, actually, these are the type of experiences they can have that will maybe help prepare them?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a very difficult question to answer, and it's because it's very individualized. Again, I've been lucky to work with some incredible sport psychologists, performance psychologists in my time, and I've seen lots of strategies and efforts. But I think, in principle, if you can expose them to things that are of a similar level of challenge, and then help them to understand how they personally, as an individual, are more effective under that level of strain, then you're giving yourself a chance. So that's probably not a brilliantly simple answer, but I don't know. Let's say it's going to be let's say the MCG, it's going to be 38 degrees. It's going to be really hot, and you're probably going to have a load of angry, drunk Australians yelling at you. So that's not everything that's the challenge, but that's some of the challenge. So you can probably go, right, well, that's about being under physical duress, that it's hard, it's hot, so physically difficult, and you've got some people who are being really negative towards you. So you can do all sorts of training about that, can't you? Like you could send people, and all this stuff goes on, isn't it? You can go off and do a military training camp where it's incredibly physically hard and a big, ugly army bloke shouting at you. So that's replicating some elements. But the point is, how do you deal with it? So what's your own strategy? So I might deal with that in a different way than you do, Righty. Like I might go, right, I know I'm really physically well trained. I'm fit as a butcher's dog. So actually that gives me the confidence I can handle this. Okay, I can handle this physically. And then I've got a personal strategy that if people are negative towards me from the crowd, or if the army guy I've got some psychological strategies that I go, I know I'm a good person. I know I can handle this. I've handled it before. They're only words. I don't know. I'm just making it up as I go along like that. But it's a strategy. So when I'm walking out to bat and it's hot and I've got some Aussies giving me some jip, I've got some strategies that give me a better chance of self-regulating at that time. And then, other elements of the challenge are I'm going to have, Hazelwood and Cummings charging in at me. So I've done a load of skill training. So I've done bouncer practice, I've done sidearm, I've done all this stuff. I know I can deal with a short ball. I know my technique's strong. So I can self-regulate on that, can't I? So I think at the heart of it, it's having your own menu of psychological options to call on to meet the need of the environment at that moment. And like any sort of skill, if you've got more skills available and they're more well practiced, you're just giving yourself a better chance. But even then, I mean, bloody hell, look what happened the first ball of the Ashes. Rory Burns, I don't know how many tests he's played. He must have played 25 or 30 tests. He's an experienced international cricketer. He's faced the best bowlers in the world for the last couple of years. Even then, and I'm doing it here. He's standing there, ready to face that first ball. Where his head went and where his front foot went is not where they normally go. And that's pressure. That's what pressure does to us. If he was playing at the Oval against Hampshire, he wouldn't have been in that same position because he wouldn't have felt the same amount of pressure. He'd have clipped that ball through the leg side. But that's the beauty of the challenge we're trying to take on at the very, very top level. It is incredibly high levels of pressure. And what pressure does to human beings is it makes us stupid. It makes us do dumb stuff. So the battle is, how can I do less dumb stuff under the highest amount of pressure? That's what I reckon.
I think it's really interesting. And you look at what a perceived top performance, and the interesting ones for me are the ones that almost come across as if they don't care. I remember playing with a lad called Angelo Balanta, and I've told this story before. We're playing away at Plymouth, which isn't a nice journey for anyone. But he missed a penalty and started laughing. And so like some of the lads are obviously absolutely fuming. But then 2 minutes later, he's got the ball cut inside and whipped it top corner and scored. And for me, I was like, that's almost like a get out for him. It feels like psychologically, that's his way to deal with it, is to go, actually, if I act and I'm carefree, it allows me the ability to lose like the negative outcomes that happen of me losing the ball or being played round or whatnot, to then carry on and play my natural game. And I look at someone like, again, Kevin Piertersen, who you'll know. For him, a number of times he would have got out trying to play expansive shots of hitting it over and miscuing it or whatever. But actually, it flips it the other way. When he's doing it and is on form, it's putting pressure on the other person because they're thinking, oh God, KP's going off here. And you almost reverse it in terms of what should be a pressurized situation for him. He's gone, well, no, I'll let you deal with that because now you're worrying about what I'm doing. And it's quite a balancing act in terms of if you can negate that, it just shifts where that pressure continuum goes, really.
100%. And look, I know it's a well-used phrase, isn't it? But pressure is perspective, isn't it? It's only ourselves telling us that it's pressure. And your point there, like if you just didn't care, like if you did not care one iota about the crowd at the MCG or who you were bowling, who was bowling at you, you'd be able to perform much better. It's because we care and we make a big thing of it, either consciously or subconsciously. That's why we get stuff so badly wrong. And that's why there's a prevalence in elite lots of things for people who are on the sort of scale of psychopathy, isn't there? Like if you're a psychopath, I'm probably going outside of my remit here, but there's a big field of work, certainly in cricket, around the kind of the dark triad of psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism. Because again, if you're a narcissist, and there's different types of narcissism, it's actually probably helpful to take on the world's best at something. And if you don't care as much about what people think about you, it's probably helpful. So it's fascinating to me, Righty, that I've been very, very lucky. I've coached and played with and against genuine best in the world. I've hung around with the likes of Shane Warne, and Piertersen was at Hampshire and didn't spend much time with him, but I got to see him operate a bit, and my time at England Cricket, some top people, got to know Andy Flower quite well, as well as I've been lucky enough to get to know the likes of Floyd Woodrow, who's probably one of the best soldiers who's been in the world, top SAS guy who was then head of selection for the SAS. And, these people are a slightly different breed, even to those who operate at a decent level. Andy Flower was the number one batsman in the world and then became coach of the team that went to number one in the world. He's a unique animal, and he does stuff a bit different than other people. So these guys are just elite on a different level. Warne was just a different guy, and so I feel like I don't know any of the I don't know Warne or Piertersen or Flower well enough to really give you any insight, but I've seen them operate, and I've seen that they just do stuff and deal with stuff slightly differently than us other mere mortals. And I think it's to do with how they deal with pressure, personally.
So looking at the way they deal with stuff, I think Warne's a good example. As you said, you kind of spent a bit of time around with him. looking at the way that he would have dealt with situations, be it a low score set, but as a team you've set a low score in a one dayer and you're trying to defend it to get them out, or the way he approached his overs and his craft and stuff. What was so unique around him, or what is there anything in particular you can describe that would say actually this is what made him potentially the best spin bowler ever?
I mean, I don't know enough about his background. I mean, other than what I've read, I know one of the things he did was he practiced an enormous amount as a young bloke, and he honed his craft. So he honed his craft, and he had incredible control. So he was an amazing performer. By the time he came to Hampshire, when I was there, he was already the world's best bowler, basically. I think the thing that I observed that stood out was just the positive attacking mentality and the genuine belief that he could win any game, regardless of what situation. Like, it was so different. It was so eye-opening to me. Like, I'd come through a private schoolboy's cricketing career, being a pro for 4 or 5 years or whatever it was. And, I tried really hard. And then I saw this guy, and he was just like, no, we can win this game. We'll declare 120 ahead and we'll have a bowl at them for the last session and a half. But why wouldn't we? It was just so different than anything I'd ever seen or experienced before. So the inner genuine, and I think it's genuine, authentic belief that he could win was the likes of which I've never, ever seen anything close to. I couldn't believe it. So, and then that gives others around you just confidence, doesn't it? I mean, you've got the best bowler in the world bowling from one end, so that helps. But he genuinely believes he can win. It's a bit like, you watch military army movies, don't you? And you've just got someone like the military commander who, says a rousing speech and goes, come on, lads, we'll go into this battle and we'll go and win. And they're like, well, hang on, there's 1,000 of them, there's 100 of them. Like, yeah, but we can still win. Like, it's that sort of, it's almost bizarre. But then the people start looking around and going, oh, well, if he believes we can, then we probably can. And I think there's something in there, IT, about like unshakable belief in yourself and those around you that you can win any situation. And that's what I observed. And sometimes we won, sometimes we lost, but he still believed we could win every game. It was mad.
I guess linking that back to where we are with the test team, the one-day team at the minute, do you think that that's maybe where the differences in format are? Because it's a lot of the same players, isn't it, that are crossing over formats. But actually, you look at the T20 and the one-dayers, and I know that there's a skill element to this as well. But actually, there's a belief in that squad. It's like, it doesn't matter who we play against. We'll probably beat them, or we're going to be in with an opportunity. Whereas the discussion around the tour coming up, everyone was like, oh, Jesus, this is going to be a bloodbath, which obviously subsequently it has been. Do you think that is part of it in terms of the mindset of the players going into that environment and going, well, we're probably a bit undercooked. We haven't, got the best record of late, blah, blah, and then all those things just slowly eke out and manifest themselves?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, I don't know what the stats are, but not many people go to Australia and win, do they? Let's be honest. It must be only a handful in the last 10 years, 15 years. So statistically, you're at a pretty challenging baseline. So the baseline stat is you're probably going to lose. And then if you're underprepared, that's not going to help and that's not controllable, is it? With the current COVID situations, like we haven't played much cricket, so probably undercooked. I can't remember how it unfolded, but we didn't get many warm-up games, did we? So again, all of these things will impact your level of belief that you can win. And then if the first ball of the tournament, your opening batter gets cleaned up, if you had like a barometer for levels of belief we can win, it's starting to go in the wrong direction, isn't it? Because I think, and again, it's a really interesting contrast to the one-day team and the T20 team. They've got lots and lots of evidence at the moment that they can win games of cricket. they've spent the last 5 or 6 years winning lots of games of cricket. So they go into each game thinking we can win this game. And there's quite a lot of evidence to show they can. So I think the mindset and belief, and then look, you can just see it happening. As over the last, I've watched quite a bit of it over the last couple of weeks. You can just see the belief on a trajectory down, can't you?
I haven't watched that much. It was over quite quick. No, I get what you mean there, and it is one of those ones where you're looking at it and people are then doing things they wouldn't normally do. They're acting in ways they wouldn't normally act, and you can see like it's a team where you almost want to put your arm around and be like, listen, just come home. We'll reset when we get home, but just have come home.
You do, but you're dead right. I was chatting to one of my good friends who's an Ashes winner himself, and I was having a few messages with him the other night, and he was just like 3-0 down, you're getting hammered, like it's awful, absolutely awful, and I think in and amongst it though, you've got Joe Root having the most remarkable year of Test batting. So you've got one bloke whose belief in himself is sky high. He's an incredible batter. I think I saw the stat that the third highest run scorer for us this calendar year is extras. So in and amongst it, you've got Root, who's on a different level to, he's in the top 2 or 3 batters in the world. Jimmy Anderson, without doubt, now, the greatest seam bowler of all time. I watched him bowl a spell the other night, and he just had it on a string. He's still a world-class bowler. I mean, he's nearly 40, but he's still doing the business. He should have got a 5 for the other night. You've got Root and Anderson, who are their belief in their own abilities. This is what the sort of theme we're going on here, isn't it? Is sky high. And then you've got a lot of players who either, Stokes has had a very challenging period of time. He's still a world-class player, but he's not had as much cricket. And then you've got some really, really decent young players. Some of the lads I've been very fortunate to work with, the likes of Haseeb, Hamid and Ollie Pope, these guys are going to be top players. But they're in a cauldron, aren't they? And I think Haseeb has held himself incredibly well this series, really. He's had a couple of, really good balls that have got him out, and he's made a couple of poor shots. That happens, doesn't it? But I guess the theme is belief. Like Root and Anderson's belief will be high. You've got other lads' belief which will be lower, and then you've got the Aussies who are relentless in their own backyard. Their own belief in themselves will be very high. So, dragging it right back, if this comes back to coaching and coach development for me, which is our number one goal as developers of players or developers of coaches. We should be helping them develop belief in themselves. I think that's the absolute heart of it. If you think about you as a player, righty, or if I think about me as a player, my best innings or my best games of football I played is when I was confident in myself and I felt I had the skills to deal with the challenges that were in front of me. So surely, as coaches, we have to be building belief. And if we're not, I think we should be asking ourselves some really tough questions. Did I really need to be negative to that player? Was it helpful for me to point out how rubbish they're playing at the moment? Like, was that really helpful? Or should I be going, all right, you're not playing that well at the moment. Let's think about what you're like when you're at your best. What's you at your best? What does it feel like when you're on top form? Or what are the skills you need to take you closer to being top form? Like, this is the heart of it, isn't it?
I think it's really interesting. You're right. When people got confidence themselves, it's a different proposition, really. And I think that unless you're being purposeful and you're trying to put a sticky patch in for a player because actually they're high performing and you want a bit of high challenge for them, and you're purposeful around it, and then you tell them of that intention, the bit of a coach would be that they feel confident in walking out onto any pitch or any court or whatever it is. And they go, regardless of what happens here, I've got the full backing of my coach who's going to help me get better, be it win, lose or draw.
I love the phrase, comfort the challenge, comfort the challenged, and challenge the comfortable.
Yeah.
Which is, to your point, the time when you might be hard on a player or negative on a player is when they're flying. And you're thinking, I'm not making this hard enough for them. That goes back to that initial point about high challenge, high support, doesn't it? Like if you've got a lad in your under 16s who's scoring goals for fun or keeping on scoring hundreds every week or whatever, the challenge probably isn't high enough for them at that time. So they need to experience success, of course, but they also need to be challenged because they're going to get it at some point. So you're letting them down if you just let players succeed all the way through a development pathway. Then they're going to hit a speed bump at some point, and it's probably not a wise idea for that first speed bump to be when they hit the international stage or the Premier League stage, because they won't have the skills to deal with it.
100%. And one thing that we've spoken about previously, and you told me stories about a fast bowler in the West Indies tour, which is around players taking accountability. So obviously when we're talking about high level of challenge, this could be one where actually you say, you know what, come up with a strategy to get this player out, or go and do the warm-up yourselves in the younger ones, or whatever that looks like, or make sure that all the equipment we need is ready on that bus to go at 10 o'clock. And basically giving them ownership to say, this is your team. Can we get to a stage where actually you do everything and we're here as a resource when you need us? Can you talk through that story, if you're allowed to, around the fast bowler and you said to everyone about the necessary of being hydrated, and what that led to you as a team, and the challenges that set for you as a team?
Yeah, I can talk through in principle. I won't name any names, but I was coaching a team, and we were playing a very important game to us of cricket, and we had a set of team values that we'd all agreed upon around how we were going to get the best out of ourselves and each other. And one of those values was that we were in a hot country at the time. It wasn't actually the West Indies, it was a different country. We were in a hot country, and we said every player has to take accountability to bring their own water bottle to every game, otherwise you won't play. And we turned up, and our opening bowler, who has now played international cricket, is a very good bowler, hadn't brought his water bottle. And we had a very difficult team meeting where we got around and we said, we're playing a really important game here, but we've agreed this as a team. And ultimately, it was a very simple answer, wasn't it? We'd be compromising our team values if we let him play, because we've agreed he won't play, so he didn't play. And, I hope he's never forgotten his water bottles. Yeah, it's a really, it's a really important point, Nighty, for me personally. And it's a piece of work I've been doing in my current role, certainly with our older age group teams, is around helping the coaches to allow the players to take more accountability for stuff. So, look in our B team environment now, we have player-led pre-match meetings, we have player-led game reviews. We've got players standing in front of their peers delivering tactical information or calling each other out. Now, we've not got it perfect, but we're making progress, because I think historically what I've seen in the older age groups of football coaching is some extremely talented, skillful coaches who've got a lot to say, saying a lot of stuff to players. And that's not always the best learning environment, in my opinion. So I feel very, very privileged and fortunate to be working with under 18s and under 23s coaches who are open-minded enough to do things a bit differently at the moment. And for me, the players are getting better. I think we're at a club where in the under 9s to under 16s program, this has been going on for a number of years, because they get it, they get the fact that player involvement in learning is paramount. But unless there's a level of accountability to the players, then we're doing them a disservice. I think there's a lot to come in this space because we still bus them around, give them food, wash their clothes for them. I don't think they get a really true experience of what it's like to be a early 20s sports person, especially when most of them won't be playing Premier League. They'll be playing a much, much lower level. So again, I'm obviously getting old because I'm thinking, back in my day, as an 18-year-old, I just finished my A levels, and I'd signed a pro contract and had to send me out to Australia for 5.5 months on my own. Now that was a dual purpose because I was going to go out and play Australian grade cricket and experience some really, really good skill development. But B, I lived in what I would fondly call a luxury porter cabin. I was basically lived in a porter cabin with a couple of other English blokes. I had to wash my own clothes. I had to learn how to cook because my mum, bless her, had cooked all my food for me. And, I probably knew how to do beans on toast and fish fingers. That was about it. But for 5 months, I had to look after myself. I had to budget. I'd earn a little bit of money working as a porter at the Hilton Hotel in Southampton. So I got a bit of money with me and I had to work out how to survive. Now, for me, the life skills I learned having to manage my own time and manage my own money and cook and clean and wash my clothes, that was incredibly important for me as a young sportsman. That's a very, very different experience to what a current under-18 footballer is getting in a Premier League Category 1 academy. And I think, yes, of course, we have to provide a world-class or, aspiring to be a world-class environment. We also have to help them learn to be a good young human. And we've got a life skills program, which is excellent. We've got really good staff everywhere, but my sense is we do a bit too much. So there's some stuff we can do a bit better, I reckon.
No, it's really interesting. I actually listened to a podcast yesterday, Under the Kosh one, which obviously normally is full of banter, but Matt Mills was on there talking about his career. And one of the things he was discussing, and this is just his opinion on it, is that we don't actually allow the younger players necessarily to always make mistakes because managers is so technical and tactical what they're asking to do and so specific that transfers over to all walks of life, where we say to them, don't make a mistake by being late because you've got the bus in rather than being chauffeured in or whatever that is, or don't make a mistake by getting food poisoning because you undercook your chicken, even though you'll learn next time not to undercook your chicken. And maybe there is an element of that of going, actually, if we removed it and go, yeah, we accept that there's probably going to be issues on that pathway of them making mistakes, but actually how much better would they be for it?
Yeah. Let's help them make more mistakes.
Yeah.
Let's change the game. Come on, let's change the game by making it harder for them rather than easier, because then it'll be better for them. I think we've, certainly at Southampton, we've done a couple of pre-season trips with the scholars now where they've been, and it's been brilliant. They've been given some money and given a rendezvous point and told, right, get yourself there, and if you get there, then you can do pre-season. Things like that. That's brilliant. Because then they've got to go, oh, right, how am I going to get there? Am I going to take a train or a bus? This is the sort of stuff that, I just think if we're not doing things like that, we're letting them down. Because yes, if by the tiniest of margins they genuinely carve out a 15-year career in Premier League football, they're not going to need these skills because they're going to have loads of money and they'll be able to employ people to do it for them. But statistically, come on, the chance of, unfortunately, the reality is they're not going to be a Premier League footballer. They're very unlikely to be. I mean, I've got all the stats. It's not a very likely thing to happen. And if you track it right back to 9-year-olds, I think the most recent stat I saw was any 9-year-old that enters a football academy has a 0.05% chance of making a career in the game, and making a career includes semi-pro. So I've got an 8-year-old lad actually who really likes football. So if he was invited into Saints Academy, he would have a 0.05% chance of even being a semi-pro. So it's not I don't think us building towards him being a Premier League footballer is actually a very sensible thing to do. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try and help him have the skills to become. He's more like a teacher or a dustbin man than he is a Premier League footballer. So if we systematically remove all the other development experiences that he needs to be a teacher or a dustbin man, then we're doing him a disservice, aren't we?
It's actually, you can put it the other way and go, what a fantastic tool football can be to teach him all of these lessons, something that he loves. And as you said, we are very well resourced, so ability to go away with his friends and stay overnight places and meet new teams and play against things and play in stadiums. Actually, let's flip it on its head and do it that way and go, loads of great learning experiences for a boy that otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to have them.
Amazing, yeah. And I'm a massive advocate of having academies. I think, if you've got a kid who's passionate about football and you can systematically introduce him to amazing events and experiences that give him skills in life with his mates, it's the biggest privilege in the world, isn't it? So we just have to, I think the flip is, what are we doing it for? We need to flip it, like you've said there, Righty. We can help each lad have an amazing experience and come out with the skills that will leave them in a really good place for life in general. If during that journey we've not helped them understand how to take a train or wash their clothes or understand finance and stuff like that, then we're not giving them the skills, are we?
Perfect point to end on. So, Brunscher, I've got one last question for you, which is, who is the best player or coach you've worked with or against, and why? And good luck with this question.
Oh, my word. The best player or coach
you've worked with or against, and why?
Oh, my word. I wish you'd have asked me this before we did the podcast so I could have had a think about it. I mean, I'm so privileged. This is going to sound like I'm so privileged, right? I mean, I've worked with, and again, I've played against Shane Warne, Steve Waugh, I played with Wazzy McCrath, I've played against Brett Lee. I've worked with Andy Flower. I've coached with Peter. I've been very lucky. I've been exposed to a lot of top people. So I can't think of a best. I mean,
is there a why then? So you talk about all those people. Is there a why? Is there something that stands out for you and your character as to why they were such brilliant people in their fields?
Yeah, I do think there's a theme. We've talked about Warne. Warne is, undoubtedly one of the world's best sports people of all time. He's right up there. And it's he loves cricket. He just loves the game, and that's what it starts with: is an absolutely deep-rooted, authentic passion for the game, which meant he was incredibly curious about how to bowl leg spin. He practiced an enormous amount, and he became incredibly good. Again, like Andy Flower loved batting, absolutely, and that's why he became the best batsman in the world at the time. And then he started to look into coaching and leadership, and he absolutely loved coaching and leadership, and that's why he had such outrageous success. So I'll go with those two, if you'll allow me, Warne and Flower, because and at the heart of it is just their genuine passion for what they're doing, and then their mindset towards getting better at it.
Perfect. Listen, Brunchy, really appreciate your time. We haven't talked about half the stuff that we discussed previously, as I knew would happen. So hopefully at some other point in the future, we can come on and talk about your Olympic sports time and all that type of stuff. But yeah, really appreciate it and catch up with you soon.
Top man. Cheers, Righty.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.